guys were what I would call principled scoundrels. They'd never just outright steal something. That would be wrong. But you could be sure they'd use any available legal loophole and perhaps some clever costuming to get whatever they thought they should have. Scoundrels. Yet, Jacob, who would soon be renamed Israel, would, with his wives, have 12 sons, and each would form one of the, yeah, you guessed it, 12 tribes of Israel. Joseph, his son from his beloved Rachel, would live through his own episodes of family drama and betrayal in order to get to be in a place where he would not only save his family, but actually his entire people. And that story would be at the heart of God's family Israel forever, reminding them that God continues to call them and redeem them. Here's the amazing thing. God works through the free choices, both the good and the bad of humans, to achieve heavenly purposes. We get an indication of this when Joseph, in years to come from Jacob's story, tells his own brothers who sold him into slavery, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." God does not take away from our free will. God lets us choose. And whether we pick what is good or what is not so good, God's Spirit is always able to work with our choices to advance God's positive purposes. There were plenty of negative consequences for Jacob. He had to flee from his brother's anger at his deception, leaving with nothing but the cloak on his back and a staff in his hand, and having to spend 20 years in exile. But through the hardship of those years, his character was shaped, and he became a man who could lead the tribes of Israel into their future, even if he took a few liberties along the way. It's a family trait, as we shall see. This fall, we'll drop in on the stories of some folks we wonder why we would ever call heroes of faith. David, Samson, and even the ever-wise Solomon all had their failings, but God used each of them for good. But one last question now, and I'm not implying anyone here is a world-class swindler or anything like that, but I wonder if you can think of something in your past that you are rather ashamed of, something that maybe you never told anyone about, but something that ended up benefiting you in some way. Like when you took advantage of a situation and it worked out for you, even though you had some uneasiness, either then or later, about how ethical or right it was to do so. Now I'd call that a sideways blessing. When something is achieved at by not going the right way. A blessing that you get kind of sideways. It almost always carries with it a little tinge of guilt that spoils our complete satisfaction in the good outcome. And it might even disturb our peace for a long time. Like the song says, your cheating heart will tell on you. So here's your homework for this week. Take a moment to acknowledge that time in your life when your path was not exactly straight, but nevertheless had led you to a blessing. This is especially important to do if it caused harm to someone else. Then acknowledge your part in this, either between you and God, or even better, perhaps between you and that person. And then thank God for transforming even what is crooked into something beautiful in your life. Because here's the amazing thing. God works through the free choices, both the good and the bad, of all of us struggling humans, trying our best to do what we can do. God uses all of those things to achieve God's heavenly purposes. Our wrong turns, our less than straight paths, and debatable motives will no doubt almost always cause us pain, and it certainly grieves God. But God can still redirect those events for a higher purpose according to the kingdom. Romans 8:28 reminds us that we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose, even if they mess up along the way. God considers us a work in progress. Believe this: nothing can withstand the power of God's transformative spirit. Not our weaknesses, not our failings. Nothing. And that is amazingly good news. Thanks be to God. Amen.